The morning sun was just beginning to warm the streets of Millfield, Ohio, when Connor Blake heard the sound that would change everything. It wasn't the familiar rumble of an engine or the hiss of air brakes from the delivery trucks that passed his garage. It was silence. The kind of silence that comes before everything you thought you knew about your life gets turned upside down. Connor wiped his hands on an old rag, the same one he'd been using for 3 years now, ever since he'd stopped caring about small things like clean shop rags and started focusing only on what mattered: his daughter Emma and the work that kept food on their table. At 36, Connor had owned Blake's Auto Repair for 8 years, building it from a single-bay operation in a borrowed garage into a respected business that served half the county. His dark hair was touched with early gray at the temples, and his muscular frame showed the results of years of physical work. But it was his eyes that told the real story. Blue eyes that had once sparkled with hope and humor, now carrying the weight of 3 years of single parenthood and the kind of loneliness that follows a man around like a shadow. "Daddy, can I have the chocolate donut?" The voice that saved his life every single day called out from the small office in the corner of the garage. Emma sat at the child-sized desk he'd built for her, her blonde hair pulled into a ponytail with a pink bow that was slightly crooked, because Connor still hadn't mastered the art of little girl hairstyles. "Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel." At 5 years old, Emma spent most summer mornings with him at the shop, coloring in her books or playing with the collection of toy cars that customers had brought her over the years. She was his whole world had been ever since her mother Sarah had walked out when Emma was barely 2 years old. "Just one sweetheart," Connor said, looking over at his daughter with the smile he reserved only for her. "We don't want you bouncing off the walls before Aunt Lisa comes to get you." Emma giggled, the sound that never failed to make Connor's heart feel both full and broken at the same time. She carefully selected her donut from the box he'd picked up on their way in, taking her time to choose the one with the most sprinkles. Everything Emma did was deliberate, thoughtful, as if she'd learned early that good things were rare and should be savored. Connor turned back to the engine he'd been working on, a 2018 Ford pickup that belonged to old Mr. Henderson from the hardware store. The alternator was shot, and the belt was making a squealing sound that could wake the dead. Simple fix, really. Everything in Connor's world could be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. Everything except the hollow ache in his chest that whispered to him in the quiet moments that he was failing his daughter by not being enough, by not being 2 parents instead of 1. The wall behind his workbench was covered with Emma's artwork. Crayon drawings of houses with smoke curling from chimneys. Stick figure families and always pictures of cars. She'd inherited his love of engines, could identify the sound of different makes and models from across the parking lot. "That's a Chevy," she'd announce when customers pulled up. "Needs new brake pads." And she was usually right. Connor had filed for divorce and gotten full custody without a fight. Sarah hadn't contested anything, hadn't asked for visitation rights, hadn't even left a forwarding address. Just a note on their kitchen counter that said, "I can't do this anymore. Emma deserves better than what I can give her." Connor had never understood what she meant by that. Emma was perfect. How could anyone walk away from perfect? The morning routine was sacred. Coffee for Connor, juice box for Emma. Connor would check his appointment book while Emma arranged her crayons by color. They'd share a donut and talk about what Emma wanted to do that afternoon when Aunt Lisa picked her up. It was simple, predictable, safe. Connor had learned that safe was more important than exciting when you were raising a child alone. He'd learned a lot of things in 3 years. How to braid hair, though his attempts still looked like abstract art. How to paint tiny fingernails without getting polish on everything else. How to explain why some families only had daddies, while other families had mommies and daddies both. How to hold a crying 5-year-old who asked why her mummy didn't love her enough to stay. Daddy Emma called from her desk, not looking up from the elaborate castle she was coloring. "Do you think my mommy is happy?" The question hit Connor like a physical blow. Emma rarely asked about Sarah anymore, and Connor had hoped that meant she was forgetting. But children don't forget. They just learn when it's safe to remember out loud. "I don't know, baby," Connor said honestly. He'd learned that Emma could sense lies, and she deserved better than his attempt to protect her from the truth. "I hope she is. I hope she's happy too," Emma said matter-of-factly. "But I hope she's not too happy, because if she's too happy, she might not want to come back." Connor set down his wrench and walked over to his daughter. He knelt beside her desk the same way he had when she was 2, and crying for her mommy the same way he had when she was 3, and asked if mommy was dead like the goldfish, the same way he had when she was 4, and announced that she didn't need a mommy anyway because daddies were better at fixing things. "Emma, sweetheart, look at me." She turned those serious brown eyes on him, eyes that looked exactly like his own. "Your mommy leaving had nothing to do with you. Okay? You are the most lovable little girl in the entire world. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense to kids. Sometimes they don't make sense to other grown-ups either." Emma nodded solemnly. "Like when Tommy's daddy moved to Florida without him? Kind of like that." Connor smoothed her hair, trying to fix the crooked bow and making it worse. "But you know what? You and me, we make a pretty good team, don't we?" "The best team," Emma agreed, throwing her arms around his neck. "Daddy and Emma against the world. Daddy and Emma against the world," he repeated, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and wondering for the millionth time how any mother could voluntarily give up these moments. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Connor looked up to see a woman enter. He stood up, wiping his hands again on the rag, slipping back into professional mode. But something about this woman made him look twice. She wore a navy blue business suit that had seen better days, the kind that suggested she was trying to look more successful than she felt. Her blonde hair fell in waves past her shoulders, even in her obvious distress, and she moved with the careful efficiency of someone who couldn't afford to waste a single motion. She was beautiful, but it was the kind of beauty that came from good bone structure and determination rather than expensive care. There were shadows under her green eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights and worry that had become a permanent resident in her chest. "Please tell me someone can help me," she said, her voice carrying a note of desperation that Connor recognized. It was the same tone he'd used 3 years ago when he'd called his sister at 2 a.m, begging her to come over because Emma had a fever and he didn't know what to do. "My car just died 2 blocks from here. It's making a terrible noise, and I have the most important job interview of my life in 45 minutes. Connor set down his tools and walked over, immediately shifting into the mode he used with customers who were at the end of their rope. He'd learned to read desperation, and this woman was drowning in it. "Let's take a look," he said gently. "I'm Connor Blake. Where's the car? Just down the street on Maple." She checked her watch, a cheap digital one that had probably come from a drugstore. "I managed to coast it to the curb before it completely died. I'm Sarah, by the way. Sarah Mitchell." The name hit Connor like a punch to the gut, but he pushed the reaction away. Sarah was a common name. Half the women in Ohio were probably named Sarah. "Nice to meet you, Sarah. Let me grab my keys and we'll go take a look." "Daddy, can I come?" Emma had abandoned her coloring and was already putting on her light jacket. She loved car emergencies, treated them like adventures. "Sure, baby. Grab your backpack in case we need to wait with the car." They walked the 2 blocks together, Sarah setting a brisk pace despite her heels clicking against the sidewalk with each urgent step. She kept checking her watch, and Connor could practically see the anxiety radiating from her like heat from a radiator. "This is the worst possible timing," she muttered more to herself than to Connor and Emma. I've been preparing for this interview for weeks. It's for a social worker position with the county. And if I don't get this job—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "We'll figure it out," Connor assured her, though he knew that sometimes cars couldn't be fixed fast enough for real life. "What kind of social work? Family services? Helping kids in difficult situations?" Sarah's voice softened slightly. "I know what it's like to be a kid who needs someone to fight for them." Emma looked up at Sarah with new interest. "Do you help kids like me?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, and Connor noticed that her voice changed completely when she addressed Emma. It became warmer, more gentle maternal. "Kids who only have daddies," Emma explained matter-of-factly. "Some kids at school think that's weird." Sarah stopped walking for a moment, something flickering across her face that Connor couldn't quite identify. Pain, maybe. Recognition. "There's nothing weird about families that look different," Sarah said carefully. "Some kids have mommies and daddies. Some kids have just mommies, some have just daddies, and some have grandparents or aunts or other people who love them. What matters is that you have someone who loves you very much." "I love my daddy very much," Emma announced. "And he loves me infinity plus one." "Infinity plus one is a lot of love," Sarah said softly, and Connor saw her blink rapidly as if fighting back tears. The car was a late-model sedan, dark blue and well-maintained from the outside, but the engine was making a grinding noise that Connor recognized immediately. He popped the hood while Sarah hovered anxiously nearby, and Emma peered into the car's interior with the fascination of a 5-year-old who'd been raised in a garage. It took Connor about 3 minutes to identify the problem. The serpentine belt had snapped, which had also caused the alternator to fail. Not catastrophic, but definitely not a quick roadside fix. "Your serpentine belt snapped," he explained to Sarah, pointing to the frayed remains. "That's what's making the noise. But when the belt went, it also stopped your alternator from working, which means your battery isn't getting charged. I can replace the belt fairly quickly, but the alternator is going to take at least 2 hours, maybe 3. Sarah's face went white. 2 hours? I don't have 2 hours. I don't even have 30 minutes. She pulled out her phone, a device that had definitely seen better days, frantically scrolling through contact lists. "Okay, I'll call a ride service. Get to my interview deal with this later." Miss Emma's small voice came from inside the car. Sarah had left the driver's door open, and Emma had climbed into the back seat, apparently fascinated by something she'd found there. "Emma, get out of the lady's car," Connor said automatically, but his tone was gentle. Emma wasn't being malicious. She was just curious. "But Daddy, look." Emma held up a small, stuffed rabbit, worn and clearly well-loved. The brown fur was matted from years of hugging, and one ear was slightly chewed. "She has a bunny just like my bunny at home." Connor felt the world shift slightly, the way it does when you realize that something ordinary has become extraordinary without warning. Sarah turned, and her expression transformed completely when she saw Emma holding the toy. Her professional composure cracked, and Connor saw something raw and desperate in her eyes that had nothing to do with car trouble or job interviews. "Oh," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "That's Mr. Whiskers. He belongs to my daughter, Mia. She must have left him in the car yesterday." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she spoke. She'd be devastated if she knew she left Mr. Whiskers behind. She takes him everywhere. Your daughter Emma's eyes went wide with interest, the way they always did when she learned about other children. In Emma's world, every kid was a potential friend. "How old is she?" "She's 5, just like you," I think Sarah said, her voice soft with what sounded like barely controlled emotion. "She starts kindergarten in the fall." "I start kindergarten too," Emma announced, delighted. "Does she like horses?" "I love horses. And dinosaurs. And books about princesses who save themselves." Sarah laughed, but Connor heard the tears behind it. "She loves all of those things." "Where is she now?" Emma asked with the directness that only children possess. Sarah's composure cracked a little more. She's staying with someone else right now, while I work. Connor saw something in Sarah's eyes that he recognized because he'd felt it himself every single day for 3 years. The guilt that came with being a single parent, the constant worry that you weren't enough, the fear that every decision you made was somehow failing your child. Sarah's phone rang, cutting through the moment. She answered it, and Connor watched her face immediately tense. Yes, Mr. Peterson, I know. I'm aware of the time. There's been a complication with my car. Her voice was strained, professional, but Connor could hear the desperation underneath. No, I understand how important this is. I'll be there as soon as I possibly can. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. That was my potential boss, Sarah said, her voice flat. The interview panel is already assembled. If I'm not there in the next 20 minutes, he's moving on to the next candidate. Connor looked at this woman, this stranger whose car had broken down at exactly the wrong moment. She was a single mother, just like he was a single father. She was fighting for a job that would help other kids in difficult situations. And she was about to lose it all because of a $30 belt and an alternator that had chosen today to give up. He thought about all the times his community had helped him when Emma was small and he was drowning. The neighbors who'd brought casseroles when he was too exhausted to cook. His sister Lisa, who dropped everything whenever he called. The customers who'd paid their bills early when they knew money was tight. I'll drive you, he said. Sarah stared at Connor like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. What, I'll drive you to your interview? Connor closed the hood of her car with a decisive click. You make your presentation show them why they need to hire you. While you're doing that, I'll have the car towed back to my shop and get started on the repairs. When you're finished, you call me, and I'll either pick you up or let you know your car is ready. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to process what he'd just offered. You would do that? You don't even know me. Connor looked at Emma, who was carefully repositioning Mr. Whiskers in the back seat so he'd be comfortable. His daughter had a natural empathy that humbled him daily, an instinct to care for things that were smaller or more vulnerable than herself. You're a single mum with a daughter who loves a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Whiskers, Connor said simply. You're trying to get a job helping kids who need someone to fight for them. And right now, you need help. He gestured toward his truck, which was parked a few spaces down. That's all I need to know. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. Connor smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in weeks. Besides, Emma would never forgive me if we didn't help someone in need. Isn't that right, sweetheart? Emma looked up from where she was adjusting Mr. Whiskers' position with the seriousness of a surgeon. We should help, she said firmly. That's what nice people do. And maybe her little girl can come play with me when she gets Mr. Whiskers back. The hope in Emma's voice made Connor's chest tight. His daughter rarely asked for playdates because Connor's work schedule made them difficult to arrange, and Emma had learned not to ask for things that caused him stress. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say except thank you. Thank you so much. Say you'll give me the address so we can get you there on time. Connor replied. 25 minutes later, Connor pulled his truck up in front of an impressive government building downtown. Sarah had used the drive time to touch up her makeup in the visor mirror and review notes on her phone, but she'd also taken time to chat with Emma about kindergarten favorite colors and what Mr. Whiskers liked to do for fun. He likes tea parties, Emma had announced from the back seat. But he's very polite and always says, please and thank you. That's important in a tea party guest, Sarah had agreed seriously. Mia and Mr. Whiskers have tea parties every Sunday. Connor found himself watching Sarah in the rearview mirror, noting the way she engaged with Emma. Not the condescending tone adults sometimes used with children, but the respectful attention of someone who genuinely enjoyed kids. She answered Emma's questions thoughtfully, asked follow-up questions, laughed at Emma's silly jokes. It was nice. More than nice. It was what Connor imagined it might feel like to have a partner in parenting someone else who saw Emma as fascinating rather than exhausting. "Thank you again," Sarah said, as she gathered her things. "I'll call you as soon as the interview is over, and whatever the repairs cost, we'll figure it out. We'll worry about that later." Connor said. "Go knock 'em dead." Sarah smiled, looking more confident than she had all morning, and hurried toward the building. Daddy Emma said as they watched Sarah disappear through the glass doors. "She's really nice. She seems like it. And she has a daughter my age. I noticed that. Do you think maybe—" Emma's voice took on that careful tone she used when she wanted something but wasn't sure if she was allowed to ask. "Do you think maybe her daughter and me could be friends?" Connor's heart squeezed. "Maybe, baby. We'll have to see." As they drove back toward the garage, Connor found himself thinking about Sarah's careful way of speaking about her daughter. Something about it felt off, like she was editing her words before speaking them. But then again, single parents learned to be careful about sharing personal information with strangers. Connor knew all about building walls to protect your child. Back at the shop, Connor called Jerry's towing service and arranged to have Sarah's car brought in. Then he started preparing his work area, gathering the tools he'd need for the alternator replacement. The morning was getting away from him, and he had 2 other appointments before lunch. "Can I help?" Emma asked, putting on the child-sized work gloves Connor had bought her for her birthday. "You can hand me tools," Connor agreed, "and you can keep me company." As they worked together, Emma chatted about Sarah and the mysterious Mia, who shared her love of Mr. Whiskers. "Do you think Mia likes to color?" "I bet she likes to color. Maybe she likes purple like me. Do you think she goes to Lincoln Elementary?" "That's my school. Maybe she'll be in my class." Connor listened with half his attention while checking the alternator connections. Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, and he found himself hoping that maybe, just maybe, this chance encounter might lead to a friendship for his daughter. Emma needed friends her own age, kids who understood what it was like to have only one parent. His phone rang around noon. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and Connor realized he'd been checking his phone more frequently than usual all morning. "Connor." "It's Sarah." Her voice was bright, excited. "I just wanted to let you know the interview went brilliantly. Really brilliantly. They offered me the job on the spot." "That's fantastic news," Connor said, genuinely pleased for her. "Congratulations. I literally cannot thank you enough for getting me there on time. You saved my career, possibly my entire future." Her gratitude was palpable through the phone. "How's my car looking? I've got the new belt on, and I'm about halfway through the alternator installation. Probably another hour and a half." "Perfect. Actually, I was thinking—" Sarah paused, and Connor could hear the hesitation in her voice. "If it's not too much trouble, could I buy you and Emma lunch as a thank you? There's a great diner about 3 blocks from your shop. It's absolutely the least I can do." Connor hesitated. He'd offered help because it was the right thing to do, not because he expected anything in return. But he could hear in Sarah's voice how much this gesture meant to her, how she needed to express her gratitude in some tangible way. And honestly, Emma would love it. "That sounds great," he said. Finally. "Emma's been talking about your daughter all morning. She'd probably love to hear more stories." Sarah's laugh was warm and genuine. "I'd love to tell her about Mia. I'll see you both in an hour." Connor looked around Rosie's diner as he and Emma settled into a red vinyl booth, taking in the familiar comfort of the place. They'd been coming here since Emma was old enough to sit in a high chair, and the waitresses knew to bring Emma a chocolate milk without being asked. Today felt different, though. Today they were meeting someone sharing a meal with a woman who wasn't family, but who had somehow become important in the span of a few hours. Sarah was already seated when they arrived, looking relaxed and happy, in a way she hadn't that morning. She'd taken off her suit jacket and looked younger somehow, less stressed, more approachable. When Emma slid into the booth across from her, Sarah's whole face lit up. "Emma," she said with genuine delight. "I'm so glad you came." Emma was suddenly shy, tucking herself against Connor's side, but smiling at Sarah. "Daddy said you got the job." "I did, thanks to your daddy." Sarah's eyes met Connor's across the table. "I still can't believe you did that for a complete stranger. Most people are good when they get the chance to be," Connor said simply. "I just happened to be in a position to help." The waitress Dorothy, who'd worked at Rosie's for 20 years, came over with menus and Emma's chocolate milk. "Well, look who's here with a new friend," she said with a knowing smile. "What can I get you folks?" They ordered lunch burgers and fries for everyone with a chocolate milkshake for Emma, and after a moment's consideration, milkshakes for the adults too. As they waited for their food, the conversation flowed more easily than Connor had expected. Sarah told them about her new job, about how she'd always wanted to help kids in difficult situations. "I know what it's like to feel like no one's fighting for you," she said, her voice soft. "Every child deserves someone who will stand up for them." "Like my daddy stands up for me," Emma said, matter-of-factly. "When Mrs. Peterson at school said I was probably sad all the time because I don't have a mommy." Daddy went to the school and had a talk with her. Connor winced slightly at the memory. "I may have been a bit firm in that conversation. You told her that families come in all shapes and sizes, and that what matters is love, not the number of parents," Emma recited dutifully. "And that I'm the happiest kid you know." "Are you?" Sarah asked gently. "Happy, I mean," Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "Mostly. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a mommy too. But Daddy says that wondering about things is okay, as long as you don't forget to be grateful for what you do have." Sarah's eyes were shining with unshed tears. "Your daddy sounds like a very wise man." "He is," Emma agreed. "And he makes really good pancakes. Well, they're kind of burned, but I don't tell him that because he tries so hard." Emma Connor protested, laughing despite his embarrassment. "Thanks for sharing my culinary failures with Sarah." "You're welcome, Daddy." Their food arrived, and as they ate, Sarah shared stories about her daughter Mia. How Mia insisted on wearing her tutu to grocery stores because you never know when you might need to dance. How she'd taught Mr. Whiskers to swim in the bathtub. How she asked a million questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether elephants ever felt lonely. "She sounds wonderful," Emma said wistfully. "I wish I could meet her." Something flickered across Sarah's face at Emma's words. She's staying with my mother right now, while I work long hours." "Does she live far away?" Emma asked. "Not too far," Sarah said carefully. "But far enough that visits are complicated." Connor noticed the way Sarah's answers became vaguer when Emma asked direct questions about Mia. He understood the instinct to protect personal information, especially when it came to children and custody arrangements. Single parents learned to be cautious about sharing too much too soon. "I feel guilty about it constantly," Sarah admitted, looking directly at Connor. "I'm a single parent too. Mia's father isn't in the picture, so it's just us. Every hour I spend at work feels like an hour I'm stealing from her." The honesty in her voice hit Connor right in the chest. "I know that feeling," he said softly. "The guilt is real, but kids are more resilient than we think. Emma knows I love her even when I'm busy. I'm sure Mia knows you love her too." "She does. But sometimes I wonder if love is enough. You know, if I'm enough." "You're enough," Connor said firmly, meaning every word. "Trust me, you're enough. Your daughter has a mother who works hard to provide for her, who carries her stuffed rabbit in the car just in case she needs it, who lights up when she talks about her. That's more than enough." Sarah's composure cracked slightly, and Connor saw her blink rapidly, fighting tears. "Thank you for saying that. Sometimes it's hard to believe." Emma, who had been listening while working on her French fries, suddenly spoke up. "Miss Sarah, can Mia come play with me sometime? We could have tea parties with our bunnies. Mr. Whiskers and Cotton could be friends too." The hope in Emma's voice was almost painful to hear. Connor knew his daughter was lonely for friendship with other kids, even though she rarely complained about it. "I think Mia would love that," Sarah said softly. Once things settle down with my new job, we should definitely arrange something." "Really?" Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really, really, really, really?" Sarah confirmed, smiling despite the tears in her eyes. As lunch wound down, Sarah insisted on paying as promised, and Connor found himself reluctant for the meal to end. There was something comfortable about Sarah's presence, something that made the world feel less heavy than it had in a long time. "I should get back and finish your car," Connor said, finally checking his watch. "Probably another hour or so." "I'll come back to the shop if that's okay," Sarah said. "I need to make some follow-up calls about the job anyway, and I'd rather not go back to my apartment just yet." Back at the garage, Sarah settled into the small office area, with her phone making work-related calls, while Emma showed her the art supplies and books she kept there. Connor returned to work on the alternator, but found himself listening to the sounds of Emma and Sarah, chatting, his daughter's delighted laughter mixing with Sarah's warm responses. There was something peaceful about the scene, something that felt right in a way Connor hadn't experienced since before Sarah left. The original Sarah, his wife. This new Sarah was different, though. Where his ex-wife had been impatient with Emma's chatter, this Sarah seemed genuinely interested in everything Emma had to say. She admired Emma's artwork with real enthusiasm, asked thoughtful questions about her coloring choices, and listened to Emma's rambling stories about her stuffed animals as if they were the most fascinating tales she'd ever heard. By 4 o'clock the car was fixed. Connor started it up, listened to the smooth purr of the engine, and nodded with satisfaction. The alternator was charging properly, the belt was tight, and all the connections were secure. "All done," he announced, walking into the office where Sarah was helping Emma organize her crayon collection by color. Already Sarah looked up from the artistic arrangement of crayons. "That's wonderful. How much do I owe you?" Connor had written up the invoice while he worked parts labor standard rates. But as he looked at it now, he thought about Sarah's obvious financial stress, her careful way of talking about money, her gratitude for the simple kindness of a ride to her interview. He thought about the community that had helped him so many times when he was struggling. He tore up the invoice. "No charge," he said. Sarah's mouth dropped open. "What? No." "Connor, you can't do that. The parts alone must have cost. Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood gesture." "Connor, that's too much. I can't accept." "Sure you can." He smiled. "Pay it forward someday. Help someone else who needs it." 3 days later, Connor was replacing the water pump on Mrs. Garcia's sedan when his phone rang. Sarah's name on the caller ID made his heart do something unexpected, something he hadn't felt in so long. He'd almost forgotten what it was like. "Hi, Connor. It's Sarah." Her voice was different over the phone, more relaxed, less desperate than it had been during their first meeting. "Hey, Sarah. How's the new job treating you? Wonderfully, actually. I can't thank you enough for making it possible." She paused, and Connor could hear the smile in her voice. "I was wondering, there's a farmer's market this Saturday morning in the town square. Emma mentioned she likes strawberries, and I thought, well, if you're not too busy, maybe you and Emma would like to join me. As friends, I mean." "No pressure." Connor found himself saying yes before he'd really thought about it. "That sounds nice. Emma would love it. She's never been to a farmer's market." "Perfect. 10 o'clock, I'll meet you by the fountain in the center of the square." Saturday morning dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect late summer day that made Ohio beautiful despite all its flaws. Emma had woken up excited about their adventure with Sarah and had changed clothes 3 times before settling on her favorite yellow dress with the sunflower print. "Do I look okay, Daddy?" she asked for the 5th time as they walked toward the town square. "You look beautiful, baby. Just like always." The farmers' market was bustling with activity. Local vendors had set up stalls selling everything from fresh vegetables to homemade soap to hand-knitted scarves. The air smelled like fresh bread and coffee and the last roses of summer. Connor spotted Sarah immediately. She was standing by the fountain wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger than she had in her business suit, more relaxed, more like someone he might actually be able to know. Emma called out, running ahead, despite Connor's automatic walk. "Don't run! Warning!" Sarah's face lit up when she saw Emma, and she knelt down to embrace the little girl who launched herself into her arms without hesitation. The easy affection between them struck Connor as both wonderful and slightly surprising. Emma was usually shy with new people, but she'd taken to Sarah immediately. "You look absolutely beautiful," Sarah told Emma seriously. "That dress is perfect for strawberry picking." They wandered through the market together, Sarah pointing out different vendors and explaining how farmers' markets worked. She bought Emma a small basket for collecting strawberries, and Connor noticed that she didn't even hesitate at the $3 price tag, despite the careful way she'd counted bills at lunch earlier that week. "Tell me about your new job," Connor said as they walked toward the produce stands. "How are you settling in?" "Better than I expected," Sarah admitted. "The learning curve is steep, but I love the work. Yesterday I helped place 2 children with a foster family that's going to adopt them. Siblings who get to stay together. That must feel incredible." "It does." Sarah's voice was soft with satisfaction. "I know what it's like to feel like nobody's fighting for you. Being able to be that person for other kids. It's what I was meant to do." They reached the strawberry vendor, and Emma immediately became fascinated with the process of selecting the perfect berries. The elderly farmer, Mr. Patterson, was delighted to have such an enthusiastic customer, and let Emma sample 3 different varieties before she made her choice. "This little lady knows quality when she sees it," Mr. Patterson said, winking at Connor. "You've got a smart daughter here." "Thank you," Connor said automatically, then felt heat rise in his face when he realized the assumption Mr. Patterson had made. He started to correct him, but Sarah spoke first. "She is pretty special," Sarah said, ruffling Emma's hair. She didn't correct the assumption either, and Connor found himself wondering what that meant. They bought strawberries and fresh corn and a loaf of bread that was still warm from the oven. Emma convinced Sarah to buy honey sticks, which she'd never tried before, and Connor watched Sarah's delight as Emma explained the proper technique for eating them. "You bite off the very tip. See? Then you suck out the honey slowly so it lasts longer." "I see. This is very technical," Sarah said seriously. "I'm glad I have an expert to teach me." As they found a spot on the grass to enjoy their purchases, Connor found himself studying Sarah's face. She was beautiful, but it wasn't just that. There was something in the way she interacted with Emma, something natural and unforced that suggested she genuinely enjoyed children rather than just tolerating them. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" Emma said around a mouthful of strawberry. "Of course, sweetheart. Where does your little girl live? The one with Mr. Whiskers?" Sarah's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "She lives with my mother right now, while I get settled in my new job. Does she miss you?" "I think so." "I hope so. I miss her terribly. Why doesn't she live with you?" Connor started to intervene. Emma's questions were getting personal, but Sarah held up a gentle hand. "Sometimes grown-up situations are complicated, Emma. Sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions about what's best for their children even when those decisions hurt." Emma considered this with the gravity she brought to all important matters. Is she safe and loved where she is? Yes, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. She's very safe and very loved. Then that's what matters, Emma announced with the wisdom that sometimes surprised Connor. Daddy says love is the most important thing even when everything else is confusing. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Your daddy is a very wise man. They spent the rest of the morning wandering through the market, and Connor found himself falling into easy conversation with Sarah. She was smart, funny, and had strong opinions about everything, from the best way to grow tomatoes. Die Hard movies were actually Christmas movies. Die Hard is absolutely a Christmas movie, she argued, laughing at Connor's expression of horror. It takes place at Christmas. The main character is trying to get home to his family for the holidays, and it's about redemption and forgiveness. How is that not a Christmas movie? Because people shoot each other, Connor protested. People shoot each other in Bambi too, technically. That's very different, and you know it. Emma listened to their debate with fascination, clearly delighted to see her father engaged in playful argument with someone who could hold her own. As the morning wound down, Connor found himself reluctant to say goodbye. The day had felt normal, like something he'd almost forgotten was possible. This was wonderful, Sarah said, as they prepared to part ways. Thank you for inviting me into your Saturday. Thank you for thinking of us, Connor replied, meaning it more than he'd expected to. Miss Sarah, Emma said, tugging on Sarah's sweater. Can we do this again? Soon, Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. I would love that. What would you like to do next time? The park. The one with the really big swings. The park sounds perfect. As they walked back to Connor's truck, Emma chatted excitedly about their morning, about how nice Sarah was, about how she hoped they could see her again soon. Did you have fun today, Daddy? Emma asked as Connor buckled her into her car seat. I did, baby. Did you? The most fun. Sarah feels like... Emma paused, searching for the right word. Like family. The simple statement hit Connor harder than he'd expected. Family. It was such a small word for such a complicated thing. 2 weeks later, their Saturday meetings had become routine. First, the park, where Sarah proved surprisingly athletic and willing to chase Emma up and down the playground equipment. Then a trip to the library, where Sarah helped Emma pick out books about horses and princesses and introduced her to the children's librarian. Then ice cream at the shop on Main Street, where Emma always ordered strawberry and Sarah always got chocolate chip. Connor found himself looking forward to these outings in a way that surprised him. For 3 years, his world had revolved entirely around work. And Emma, with little room for anything else. Sarah's presence added a lightness to their routines, a sense of possibility that he'd forgotten could exist. You're good with her, Connor observed one Saturday as they watched Emma feed ducks at the pond in Riverside Park. Emma doesn't usually warm up to people so quickly. Sarah was sitting on the bench beside him, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something floral and simple that probably came from a drugstore, but somehow suited her perfectly. She's an easy child to love, Sarah said softly. She's kind and funny and incredibly smart. You've done an amazing job raising her. I've done my best. Some days that feels like enough other days. Connor shrugged. Some days I worry I'm failing her by not being 2 parents. You're not failing her, Sarah said firmly. Look at her, Connor. She's confident, happy, secure in your love. That's not accident. That's the result of good parenting. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma throw pieces of bread to the ducks with scientific precision, ensuring each duck got an equal share. Can I ask you something? Connor said after a while. Sure. Your daughter, Mia. How long has she been living with your mother? Sarah's hands tightened on her purse strap. A while now. The situation is complicated. Custody issues with her father. Something like that. Sarah's voice was careful, guarded. I'm working toward a resolution, but these things take time. Connor nodded, understanding. Custody battles could be brutal, especially for mothers without significant financial resources. He'd been lucky that his ex-wife had simply walked away without a fight. It must be hard being separated from her. It's the hardest thing I've ever experienced, Sarah said quietly. I talk to her on the phone when I can, but it's not the same as being able to hold her, to be there for bedtime stories and scraped knees and all the little moments that make up a childhood. She's lucky to have a mother who fights for her. Sarah turned to look at him, her green eyes bright with tears. Thank you for saying that. Some days I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, if my choices are helping her or hurting her. The fact that you question it proves you're doing the right thing, Connor said. Bad parents don't worry about whether they're being good parents. Emma came running back to the bench, out of bread and ready for the next adventure. Can we go to the swings now? Sarah, will you push me? Daddy doesn't push high enough because he's scared I'll fall. I am not scared you'll fall, Connor protested. I'm being appropriately cautious. Same thing Emma said, dismissively, taking Sarah's hand and pulling her toward the swing set. Connor followed, watching as Sarah pushed Emma on the swings, both of them laughing as Emma went higher and higher. There was something natural about the way they interacted, something that reminded Connor of. He stopped that thought before it could fully form. It wasn't fair to compare Sarah to his ex-wife, and it certainly wasn't fair to project his hopes and fears onto a friendship that was still new and fragile. But as he watched Sarah catch Emma at the bottom of the slide, both of them dissolving into giggles, Connor couldn't help but think that this was what he'd imagined family life would be like, back when he'd believed in happily ever after. Daddy, Emma called from the top of the climbing structure. Take a picture of me? And Sarah Connor pulled out his phone and snapped several photos of Emma and Sarah posing on the playground equipment. As he looked at the images on his screen, he was struck by how natural they looked together, how much Emma's smile resembled. He blinked, looking more closely at the photo. There was something about the way Emma and Sarah held themselves, something about the tilt of their heads that seemed familiar. But before he could examine the thought more closely, Emma was running toward the merry-go-round, and the moment was gone. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Connor found himself looking at the photos again. There was definitely something there, some resemblance he couldn't quite put his finger on. But lots of blonde women looked similar, especially in photographs. And maybe he was just seeing what he wanted to see, a woman who could fit naturally into their lives. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. Thank you for another wonderful day. Emma is so lucky to have you as her dad. Sleep well. Connor typed back. Thank you for being so kind to her. She's happier when you're around. Sarah's response came quickly. So am I. Connor stared at the message for a long time before turning off his phone. 3 months ago, he'd been resigned to a life that revolved entirely around work and Emma. Now suddenly there was this woman who made Emma laugh and made Connor remember what it felt like to enjoy adult conversation that wasn't about carburetor repairs or kindergarten homework. It was dangerous, this feeling of hope. Connor had learned that hope was a luxury he couldn't afford as a single father. Hope meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant the possibility of disappointment, not just for him, but for Emma. But as he drifted off to sleep, Connor found himself hoping anyway. 3 weeks into October, Emma's 6th birthday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made everything seem possible. Connor had been planning the party for weeks, just a small gathering in their backyard with a few neighbors and Emma's classmate from school. He'd called Sarah to invite her almost as an afterthought and had been surprised by how much her enthusiasm had meant to him. I wouldn't miss it for the world, she'd said. What does Emma love most right now? I want to get her something special. Horses. Connor had replied without hesitation. She's completely obsessed with horses. The party was scheduled for 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. By 1:30, Connor had finished decorating the backyard with pink streamers and balloons, set up a table for presents, and prepared enough hamburgers and hot dogs to feed a small army. Emma had been bouncing with excitement all morning, changing clothes 3 times before settling on her favorite dress, the yellow one with sunflowers that Sarah had complimented at the farmer's market. Sarah arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying a wrapped present that was clearly larger than Connor had expected. Emma spotted her from the kitchen window and ran outside before Connor could remind her to walk. "Sarah, you came!" Emma threw herself into Sarah's arms with the abandon of complete trust. "Of course I came," Sarah said, spinning Emma around until they were both dizzy. "I wouldn't miss your birthday for anything in the world." Sarah's gift was a beautiful wooden horse stable complete with miniature horses and riders. It was the kind of toy that Connor knew cost far more than Sarah could comfortably afford, but Emma's shriek of delight made it clear that the expense had been worth every penny. "It's perfect, Emma," breathed, kneeling on the grass to examine every detail. "Look, Daddy, the horses have names. This one is Starlight, and this one is Thunder, and this one—" She continued cataloguing the horses with the intensity of a museum curator, while Sarah watched with the kind of indulgent smile that suggested she'd taken careful note of every one of Emma's horse-related preferences. The party was a success by any measure. Emma glowed with happiness, making sure Sarah was included in every game and introducing her to the other adults as my friend Sarah, who knows everything about horses. Connor found himself watching Sarah throughout the afternoon, noting how naturally she fit into their small gathering. She helped serve cake, mediated a dispute between 2 children over the last pink balloon, and somehow convinced Emma's friend Zoe to try a hamburger, despite her announced hatred of anything that wasn't pizza. As the afternoon wound down and the other guests began to leave, Emma insisted that Sarah stay to help open the rest of her presents. "This one's from Aunt Lisa," Emma announced, tearing into the wrapping paper with birthday-level enthusiasm. It was a book about a girl who trained horses, which sent Emma into another spiral of excitement. Connor was cleaning up paper plates when he noticed Sarah had grown quiet. She was sitting on the grass beside Emma, watching her niece examine the book with an expression Connor couldn't quite identify. There was joy there, but also something else. Something that looked almost like pain. "Sarah, you okay?" Connor asked quietly, crouching down beside her. "I'm fine," Sarah said quickly, but Connor caught the slight tremor in her voice. "Just thinking about how quickly they grow up." Emma looked up from her book. "Sarah, are you sad?" "A little bit, sweetheart. Sometimes adults get sad at happy times because we remember other happy times that feel far away." Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness, then scooted closer to Sarah and leaned against her side. "When I get sad, Daddy hugs me until I feel better." "Do you want a hug?" Sarah's composure cracked completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she wrapped her arms around Emma, holding her with the desperate intensity of someone who knew how precious these moments were. "Thank you, baby," Sarah whispered. "That helps so much." Connor watched this exchange with growing concern. There was something in Sarah's reaction that went beyond normal emotion, something raw and desperate that suggested these feelings were connected to something much deeper than nostalgia. After Emma went to bed that night, Connor called Sarah. "Hey," he said when she answered. "I wanted to check on you. You seemed upset earlier." "I'm okay," Sarah said, but her voice was thick with tears. "It was just—" "Emma's party was beautiful, Connor. She's so happy, so loved. It made me think about all the birthdays I've missed, all the moments I'm not there for, with your daughter." Yes, the word came out as barely more than a whisper. "Sarah, if you need help navigating the custody situation, I know a lawyer who specializes in family law. She's good, and she might work with you on payment terms." There was a long pause before Sarah responded. It's not about lawyers, Connor. It's more complicated than that. How complicated could it be? You're her mother. You have rights. Sarah's voice was bitter. What if I did something that gave up those rights? What if I made choices that hurt her, and now I have to live with the consequences? Connor felt something cold settle in his stomach. What kind of choices? I can't talk about it, not yet. Maybe not ever. Sarah. I should go, she interrupted. Thank you for including me today. Emma's birthday was perfect. She's perfect. You're raising an incredible little girl. The line went dead before Connor could respond. Despite the emotional intensity of Emma's birthday party, Sarah continued to be part of their Saturday routines. If anything, she seemed more invested in spending time with Emma, as if each moment together was precious and not to be wasted. 2 weeks later, Connor made a decision that surprised even him. He invited Sarah to dinner at their house on a Wednesday evening, not as part of their usual weekend activities, but as something more. Something that felt almost like a date, if dates could include a 6-year-old chaperone. Are you sure? Sarah asked when he called to extend the invitation. I don't want to impose on your weeknight routine. You're not imposing, Connor said, meaning it. Emma's been asking when you're coming over for dinner, and honestly, I'd like to cook for you. Attempt to cook for you. Fair warning, my skills are limited. Sarah's laugh was warm and genuine. I'd love that. Can I bring anything? Just yourself. Connor spent Tuesday evening cleaning the house more thoroughly than he had since Emma's birthday party. He wasn't sure why Sarah's opinion of their living space mattered so much to him, but he found himself seeing their modest home through her eyes, noting the scuffed floors, the furniture that had seen better days, the walls that could use a fresh coat of paint. But he also saw the things that made it a home. Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator family photos on every available surface, the comfortable chaos of a house where a child was loved and free to be herself. Wednesday evening, Connor attempted his grandmother's pot roast recipe, something he'd tried exactly twice before with mixed results. Emma helped by setting the table and arranging a small bouquet of flowers they'd picked from the neighbor's garden with permission. Do I look okay, Daddy? Emma asked for the third time, spinning in her favorite blue dress. You look beautiful, sweetheart, just like always. Sarah arrived at exactly 6 o'clock, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a simple green dress that brought out her eyes. She looked nervous, Connor realized, which was oddly comforting since he felt like a teenager about to meet his girlfriend's parents. Something smells amazing, Sarah said, as Connor welcomed her inside. Don't get your hopes up too high, Connor warned. The smoke alarm only went off once, so I'm calling it a victory. Dinner was actually a success. The pot roast was tender, the vegetables weren't overcooked, and Emma dominated the conversation with stories about her school day, her plans for Halloween, and her detailed analysis of which cartoon horses were the most realistic. SpongeBob's horse doesn't count because it's underwater, Emma explained seriously. Fish can't really be horses. That's just silly. That's a very good point. Sarah agreed. What about the horses in Frozen? Do those count as realistic? This launched Emma into a 15-minute dissertation on animated horse accuracy, which Connor and Sarah listened to with the kind of attention usually reserved for TED Talks. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Sarah her room, complete with the horse stable Sarah had given her for her birthday. The horses had been carefully arranged in what Emma called the perfect family configuration. This is Starlight the mommy horse, Emma explained, pointing to a white mare. And this is Thunder the daddy horse. And these are all their babies. Sarah knelt beside Emma, examining the elaborate setup with appropriate seriousness. They look very happy together. They are. The baby horses are never lonely because they have both their parents to take care of them. Connor, standing in the doorway, felt his chest tighten at Emma's words. She rarely talked about missing her mother anymore, But moments like this reminded him that the absence was always there, a hole in their family that he couldn't fill, no matter how hard he tried. "Emma," Sarah said gently, "you know that families come in all different shapes, right? Some families have mommies and daddies, some have just mommies, some have just daddies. What makes a family special isn't the number of parents, it's the love." Emma nodded solemnly. "I know. Daddy tells me that too. But sometimes I still wonder what it would be like to have a mommy." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and Connor saw her hands tremble as she reached out to smooth Emma's hair. "If you did have a mummy, sweetheart, she would be the luckiest woman in the world. You're such a special little girl. Do you think she would love me?" Emma asked the question, so innocent and heartbreaking that Connor had to grip the doorframe to steady himself. "Oh, baby," Sarah whispered, pulling Emma into a fierce hug. "Any woman would be proud and grateful to be your mother. You're kind and smart and funny and beautiful. You're everything a mother could ever want in a daughter." Emma pulled back to look at Sarah with those serious brown eyes. "Sarah, would you want to be somebody's mommy someday?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Connor held his breath, waiting for Sarah's response. Yes, Sarah said finally. "Yes, I would want that very much." "Good," Emma said with satisfaction, "because I think you would be the best mommy ever." After Emma went to bed, Connor and Sarah sat on the front porch with glasses of wine, listening to the sounds of their quiet neighborhood settling into evening. The October air was crisp, but not cold, and the stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Thank you for dinner," Sarah said, "for including me in your evening routine. It felt like family." Sarah's voice was soft, vulnerable. "I haven't felt that in a long time." Connor turned to study her profile in the dim light from the porch lamp. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you ever going to tell me what really happened with your daughter?" Sarah was quiet for so long that Connor thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What if I told you that I made the worst mistake of my life? 3 years ago. What if I told you that I hurt the person I loved most in the world, and I've been trying to find a way to fix it ever since? I'd say that everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do afterward. What if the mistake was so big that forgiveness might be impossible?" Connor reached over and took her hand, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. "Then I'd say that love is more powerful than most people realize. If you really love someone, if you're really sorry, and if you're willing to do the work to make things right, forgiveness is possible." Sarah turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "How can you be so sure?" "Because 3 years ago I thought my life was over. I thought I'd failed as a husband, and I was going to fail as a father. I thought Emma and I would never be happy again." Connor squeezed her hand gently. "But we built something good from the broken pieces. Not because we forgot what happened, but because we learned to focus on what we still had, instead of what we'd lost." "I want to believe that," Sarah whispered. "Then believe it." They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands linked, each lost in their own thoughts. Connor found himself thinking about the way Sarah had held Emma earlier, the desperate intensity of that hug, the tears that seemed to come from some deep well of grief that had nothing to do with casual sympathy. And Sarah sat thinking about the little girl sleeping upstairs, the daughter she'd left behind 3 years ago, and the impossible truth that she'd been carrying like a stone in her chest ever since she'd first laid eyes on Connor Blake. Because Sarah Mitchell had once been Sarah Blake. And the daughter she missed so desperately, the child she spoke to Connor about in careful, edited terms, was sleeping 20 feet away, completely unaware that her mother had come back. Saturday morning dawned grey and drizzly, the kind of October weather that suggested winter was just around the corner. Connor had planned to take Emma to the zoo, but the forecast called for rain all day. Instead, Sarah had suggested a trip to the Children's Museum in the next town over, somewhere Emma had never been, but had been begging to visit. "Are you sure you don't mind driving in this weather?" Connor asked as they prepared to leave. The rain was coming down steadily now, not heavy but persistent. "I don't mind at all," Sarah assured him. "Besides, Emma's been looking forward to this all week. A little rain shouldn't stop us." Emma was practically vibrating with excitement as they loaded into Sarah's car. Connor's truck only had one row of seats, and Sarah had insisted she was happy to drive. She'd recently bought a small SUV with the advance on her new salary, something practical and reliable that could handle Ohio weather. "Tell me about the dinosaur exhibit again," Emma demanded from the back seat as they pulled out of Connor's driveway. "Well," Sarah said, adjusting the rear-view mirror so she could see Emma while driving, "they have a whole section with life-sized dinosaur skeletons. And there's an interactive dig where you can pretend to be a paleontologist and uncover fossils." "What's a paleontologist?" Emma asked. "Someone who studies dinosaurs and other ancient creatures by looking at their bones and fossils. Could I be a paleontologist when I grow up?" "You could be anything you want when you grow up, sweetheart." Connor listened to their conversation with half his attention. The rest of his mind focused on the woman beside him. Over the past 2 months, Sarah had become such a natural part of their lives that it was hard to remember what Saturdays had been like before her. Emma clearly adored her, and if Connor was honest with himself, he was falling for her too. There was something about Sarah that felt right. The way she listened to Emma's endless chatter without ever seeming bored or distracted. The way she remembered tiny details about Emma's preferences and interests. The way she looked at his daughter with such genuine affection that it made Connor's chest tight with emotions he wasn't quite ready to name. The Children's Museum was everything Emma had hoped for and more. She threw herself into every exhibit with enthusiasm that was exhausting to watch, but delightful to experience. Sarah proved to be the perfect museum companion, reading every placard aloud, asking Emma thoughtful questions about what she was learning, and taking dozens of photos of Emma posing with various displays. In the dinosaur exhibit, Emma became particularly fascinated with a display about parent dinosaurs caring for their young. "Look, Sarah," she said, pointing to an illustration of a mother dinosaur with her babies. "Even dinosaur mummies took care of their babies." "They did," Sarah agreed, her voice carefully controlled. "All mothers want to take care of their babies. It's the most natural thing in the world. Even if the babies are far away." Sarah knelt down beside Emma, her hands trembling slightly. "Especially if the babies are far away. Distance doesn't change love, sweetheart. A mother's love for her child is forever, no matter what." Emma studied Sarah's face with that serious intensity she brought to important conversations. "Sarah, do you miss your little girl when you're not with her?" "Every single day," Sarah whispered. "Every moment. Does she miss you too? I hope so. I pray so." Something shifted in Emma's expression, a recognition that Connor couldn't quite interpret. She stared at Sarah for a long moment, as if seeing something she hadn't noticed before. "Sarah," Emma said slowly, "you have very pretty green eyes." "Thank you, sweetheart. My mummy had green eyes too. Daddy showed me pictures." Connor felt his stomach drop. Emma rarely talked about her mother, and when she did, it was usually in the context of wondering why she'd left. He'd worked hard to keep any bitterness out of his voice when the subject came up, but these conversations were always difficult. "I'm sure your mummy was very beautiful," Sarah said carefully. "She was. But she went away when I was little because she couldn't handle being a mommy." Emma repeated the explanation Connor had given her word for word. "Daddy says some people aren't ready to be parents, and that's not the children's fault." "Your daddy is very wise," Sarah said, tears threatening in her voice. They moved on to other exhibits, but Connor noticed that something had changed in the dynamic between Sarah and Emma. There was a new intensity to the way Sarah watched his daughter, a careful attention that suggested she was memorizing every detail. And Emma seemed more thoughtful than usual, studying Sarah's face when she thought no one was looking. During lunch at the museum cafe, Emma asked for a crayon and started drawing on her paper placemat. Connor expected the usual horses or flowers, but instead she drew what appeared to be a family, 2 adults and a child. "Who's that?" Sarah asked gently, pointing to the drawing. "That's me," Emma said, pointing to the small figure in the middle. "And that's Daddy." She pointed to the taller figure on one side. "And who's that?" Sarah asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. "That's you," Emma said simply. "You're part of our family now." Connor felt his heart stop. Family. Emma had used that word before, but hearing it now in this context made it feel suddenly real and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Sarah was crying openly now, not bothering to hide the tears that streamed down her face. "Emma, sweetheart." "It's okay if you cry," Emma interrupted gently. "Sometimes people cry when they're happy. Daddy cried when I learned to ride my bike." The drive home was quieter than the drive there. Emma dozed in the back seat, exhausted from their morning adventure, and Connor found himself stealing glances at Sarah, who seemed lost in thought. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Just thinking," Sarah replied, "about families and second chances, and how sometimes the most important things come into your life when you least expect them." When they reached Connor's house, Emma was fully asleep. Connor carried her inside while Sarah followed, and they tucked Emma into her bed for a nap without waking her. "She had a wonderful time," Sarah said, as they stood in Emma's doorway watching her sleep. "Thanks to you," Connor replied. "You're so good with her, Sarah. It's like you understand exactly what she needs." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying Emma's sleeping face. "Connor, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." Before Connor could respond, Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring something they couldn't quite hear. Both adults leaned closer, and Emma's next words were clear as crystal. "I love you, Mommy." The room went completely silent. Connor felt the world shift beneath his feet as the implications of Emma's sleep-talking hit him. Sarah was frozen beside him, her face white as paper. "Did she just—" Connor began. But Sarah was already moving, backing away from Emma's bed with the desperation of someone who'd been caught in a lie too big to explain. She practically ran from the room, and Connor followed, his mind racing. In the living room, Sarah was gathering her purse and jacket with shaking hands. "Sarah, wait," Connor said. "We need to talk about what just happened." "I have to go," Sarah said without looking at him. "I'm sorry, Connor. I'm so sorry. Sarah, please, just help me understand." But she was already out the door, leaving Connor standing in his living room with questions he wasn't sure he was ready to have answered. Sarah drove aimlessly for an hour after leaving Connor's house, her hands shaking on the steering wheel and tears blurring her vision. She'd come so close to telling him the truth, had been on the verge of explaining everything, when Emma's unconscious words had shattered the careful wall she'd built around her secret. "I love you, Mommy," Emma remembered. On some level, deep in her unconscious mind, Emma remembered. Sarah finally pulled into the parking lot of a small park on the outskirts of town, the same park where she used to bring Emma when she was a toddler before everything fell apart. Before the depression hit like a freight train and dragged her so far down that she couldn't see daylight anymore. She sat in her car, staring at the empty playground, and let herself remember. 3 years ago. Sarah Blake had been 25 years old and drowning. 6 months after Emma was born, the postpartum depression that had started as baby blues had evolved into something dark and consuming that threatened to pull her under completely. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop crying. Worst of all, she couldn't bond with her beautiful daughter the way she knew she should. Every other mother seemed to take to parenthood naturally, but Sarah felt like she was failing at the most basic human instinct. When Emma cried, Sarah felt panic instead of nurturing instinct. When Emma reached for her, Sarah felt inadequate instead of loved. The guilt was crushing a weight that pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. Connor had been patient, supportive, loving. He'd suggested therapy, offered to take time off work, promised that things would get better. But Sarah had been terrified that she was a danger to their daughter, that her inability to cope would somehow damage Emma permanently. The breaking point had come on a Tuesday morning when Emma was 18 months old. Sarah had been trying to feed her breakfast when Emma knocked the bowl off her high chair, sending oatmeal flying across the kitchen, instead of laughing or even feeling mildly annoyed the way a normal mother would. Sarah had felt rage so intense it scared her. She'd grabbed Emma more roughly than she'd intended, seen fear flicker in her daughter's brown eyes, and realized with crystal clarity that she was going to hurt this child if she stayed. So she'd left. Packed a bag while Emma napped, written a note to Connor that was probably the most cowardly thing she'd ever done, and disappeared. She'd told herself it was temporary, that she just needed time to get help and get better. She'd promised herself she'd come back when she was whole again. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the longer she stayed away, the more impossible it seemed to return. How do you explain to a husband that you left because you were afraid you'd hurt his child? How do you come back from abandoning your family? Sarah had spent the first year in therapy, working through the depression and the guilt, and the terrible conviction that Emma was better off without her. She'd worked various jobs, lived in a tiny apartment 3 states away, and slowly, painfully put herself back together. The second year she'd started college courses online, working toward the social work degree she'd always wanted. She'd volunteered with children's charities, learning that she could be good with kids when she was healthy, when she wasn't drowning in her own pain. The third year she'd finished her degree and started job hunting, always gravitating back toward Ohio, toward the town where she'd left her heart behind. She'd never intended to make contact. The plan had been to move back to the area, maybe catch glimpses of Emma from a distance, just to reassure herself that her daughter was happy and healthy. She'd thought seeing Emma thriving with Connor would give her peace, would prove that leaving had been the right choice. But then her car had broken down 2 blocks from Connor's garage, and fate had thrown her directly into the path of the life she'd abandoned. Present day. Now, sitting in her car in the empty parking lot, Sarah faced the truth she'd been avoiding for 2 months. She was in love with Connor all over again. Deeper than before, because now she knew what loss felt like. And she was desperately, completely in love with the little girl Emma had become, smart and kind and confident, and everything Sarah had prayed she would be. But she was living a lie. Every moment of happiness was built on deception. Every smile from Emma was a gift Sarah had forfeited the right to receive. Every kind word from Connor was based on the assumption that she was someone she wasn't. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled to Dr. Martinez's number. Dr. Martinez had been her therapist for 3 years, the woman who'd helped her climb out of the darkness and learn to function again. Sarah de Martinez's voice was warm and familiar. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you. How are you settling into your new life?" "I need help," Sarah said without preamble. "I'm in a situation that I don't know how to handle, and I'm scared I'm going to make everything worse." "Tell me what's happening." Sarah told her everything. About the broken-down car, about recognizing Connor and Emma, about the 2 months of building a relationship based on lies, about falling in love with her own daughter all over again, and with the man who'd raised her alone. Sarah Dr. Martinez said when she'd finished, "You have to tell them the truth." "I know. But what if Connor hates me? What if he won't let me see Emma anymore? What if Emma hates me for leaving? What if they don't? What if they're able to forgive? What if this is the second chance you've been working toward for 3 years? I don't deserve a second chance. That's not your decision to make, Dr. Martinez said gently. You've done the work, Sarah. You've gotten healthy. You've built a career helping other families. You're not the same person who left 3 years ago. But what if I hurt them again? What if you don't? Sarah, you can't build a real relationship on a foundation of lies. Emma and Connor deserve the truth. And you deserve the chance to be honest about who you are and what you've learned. After the call ended, Sarah sat in her car for another hour, watching the sun set behind the empty playground. She thought about Emma's drawing at lunch, the family of 3 with Sarah included. She thought about the way Connor looked at her like she was someone worth cherishing. She thought about the life she could have if she was brave enough to tell the truth. And she thought about the life she was already living, built on deception and stolen moments and the constant fear of discovery. By the time she drove home to her small apartment, Sarah had made her decision. Tomorrow was Sunday. She would spend one more day with Connor and Emma, one more perfect day, and then she would tell Connor everything. It was time to stop running from the truth. Sunday evening arrived too quickly and not soon enough. Connor had invited Sarah for dinner again, a simple meal at home, while Emma played in the living room afterward. It was the kind of domestic scene Sarah had dreamed about during her years away, but tonight it felt like a goodbye. She'd spent the entire day memorizing details, the way Connor hummed while he cooked, the way Emma arranged her vegetables by color before eating them, the sound of their laughter mixing together. She wanted to remember everything before she destroyed it all with the truth. "You're quiet tonight," Connor observed as they cleaned dishes together after dinner. Emma was in the living room setting up an elaborate tea party for her stuffed animals. Just thinking Sarah said drying a plate with more care than it required. About what Sarah set down the dish towel and turned to face him. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Connor, I need to tell you something. Something important." He must have heard the seriousness in her voice, because he immediately gave her his full attention. "Okay. The reason I've been so careful talking about my daughter, the reason some things I've said might not have made complete sense. It's because the situation is more complicated than I've let you believe." Connor's expression grew concerned. "How complicated?" Sarah took a shaking breath. "My daughter Mia. The little girl I've been telling you about, the one with Mr. Whiskers who likes tea parties and has blonde hair and brown eyes." She couldn't finish the sentence. The words stuck in her throat like concrete. "Sarah, whatever it is, you can tell me." "Mia is Emma," Sarah whispered. Connor stared at her blankly. "What? My name used to be Sarah Blake. The woman who left you 3 years ago. That was me. Emma is my daughter. I'm the mother who abandoned you both." The plate Connor had been holding slipped from his hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "What did you just say?" Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face as 3 years of secrets finally poured out. "I know how insane this sounds. I know how impossible it must seem. But Connor, I swear to you, I never intended for this to happen. When my car broke down, I didn't know it was your garage. I didn't recognize you at first, and by the time I realized who you were, I was already falling in love with Emma all over again. And with you. And I didn't know how to tell you without losing everything." Connor backed away from her, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the dawning horror of understanding. "You're telling me that for 2 months I've been letting my daughter's mother back into her life without knowing who you are. You're telling me that every moment of happiness Emma has felt with you has been based on a lie. Connor, please let me explain." "Explain what?" His voice was rising, and Sarah was suddenly terrified that Emma would hear. Explain how you walked out on a toddler and then came back 3 years later, pretending to be someone else. Explain how you let me fall in love with you again without bothering to mention that you're the woman who destroyed my family. I didn't pretend to be someone else. I am someone else. I'm not the same person who left. I got help, Connor. I got therapy. I got healthy. You got healthy. Connor's laugh was bitter and broken. Well, congratulations. Too bad you couldn't have managed that before you traumatized your daughter and left me to pick up the pieces. Sarah flinched as if he'd hit her. I know I hurt you. I know I hurt Emma. I've lived with that guilt every day for 3 years. But Connor, I was sick. I had postpartum depression so severe that I was afraid I was going to hurt Emma. I left because I thought she was safer without me. So you've been lying to me for 2 months about who you are, and now you want me to believe you're some kind of hero for abandoning us. No, I don't think I'm a hero. I think I'm a woman who made a terrible mistake and has been trying to find a way to make amends ever since. From the living room came the sound of Emma's voice talking to her stuffed animals about the tea party she was hosting. The innocence of it, the happiness in her tone, seemed to strike Connor like a physical blow. Get out, he said quietly. Connor, please, get out of my house. Get out of our lives. Don't come back, don't call, don't try to see Emma again. She's my daughter too. No. Connor's voice was steel. You gave up the right to call her your daughter when you walked out on her. I don't know what kind of game you've been playing, but it ends now. Sarah was sobbing now, the kind of broken crying that comes from a heart shattering completely. Connor, I love her. I love you both. I came back because I wanted to be part of your lives again. You came back because you wanted to ease your own guilt. You didn't think about what seeing you again might do to Emma. You didn't consider what it would mean for her to lose you again when the truth came out. The accusation hit Sarah like a slap because there was truth in it. She had been thinking about her own need to see Emma, her own desperate longing to be close to her daughter again. I never meant for her to get hurt, but she will get hurt, because you're going to walk out of her life again, just like you did before. Except this time, she's old enough to understand what she's losing. Sarah started toward the living room, desperate to see Emma one more time, but Connor blocked her path. Don't, he said. Don't make this harder than it already is. Can I at least say goodbye? No. She thinks you're her friend, Sarah. Let her keep believing that. It'll be easier for her to think you just moved away or something. Sarah stared at him through her tears, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with twice and knowing she was losing him forever. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Sarah. Sorry doesn't undo 3 years of damage, and it doesn't change the fact that you lied to both of us every single day for 2 months. Sarah picked up her purse with shaking hands and walked toward the front door. At the threshold, she turned back one last time. Connor, I know you hate me. I know you'll never forgive me. But please, someday when Emma asks about her mother, please tell her that I loved her, that I never stopped loving her, not for a single day. Connor's face was stone. Goodbye, Sarah. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed in Sarah's chest, like the sound of her own heart breaking all over again. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway 10 minutes later, clutching her stuffed rabbit and looking around with confusion. Daddy, where did Sarah go? I wanted to show her how Mr. Cotton helped serve tea to all the other animals. Connor was still standing in the same spot where he'd watched Sarah leave, surrounded by the broken pieces of the plate he'd dropped. He looked at his daughter's innocent face and felt something break inside his chest. She had to go home, baby. But we didn't say goodbye. And she didn't see my tea party. Connor knelt down and began picking up the ceramic shards, grateful for something to do with his hands. Sometimes grown-ups have to leave quickly because of work emergencies. Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness. Will she come back next weekend? We were going to go to the pumpkin patch. The hope in Emma's voice was like a knife twisting in Connor's chest. How was he supposed to explain this? How was he supposed to tell a 6-year-old that the woman she'd come to love was actually the mother who'd abandoned her, and that now she was gone again? I don't think Sarah will be coming back for a while, sweetheart. Why not? Connor struggled for an explanation that a 6-year-old could understand. Sometimes adults have things they need to work out, important things that take a long time. Emma's face fell. But I thought she was part of our family now. The words hit Connor like a physical blow. Emma had been so happy these past 2 months, so full of joy and confidence. She'd been blooming under Sarah's attention, becoming more outgoing, more secure. And now she was going to lose that again. Emma, come here, sweetheart. His daughter approached cautiously, as if sensing that something serious was happening. You remember how we've talked about how sometimes people come into our lives for a little while, but they can't stay forever. Emma nodded, though she looked confused. Sarah cares about you very much, but she has to go take care of some important things in her life. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Sometimes adults have to make hard decisions. Is she coming back? Connor felt like he was drowning. I don't know, baby. Maybe someday, but not for a long time. Emma was quiet for several long minutes, processing this information with the gravity she brought to all difficult concepts. Daddy, she said, finally. Did I do something wrong? Is that why Sarah left? No, Connor said fiercely, pulling Emma into his arms. No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. You are perfect, and anyone would be lucky to have you in their life. Sarah leaving has nothing to do with you. But even as he said the words, Connor wondered if they were true. Sarah had left before because she couldn't handle being Emma's mother. Maybe she'd left again for the same reason. Maybe there was something about Emma that made her impossible to love permanently. Connor pushed that thought away immediately. Emma was lovable, wonderful, perfect. If Sarah couldn't see that, couldn't commit to being in her life consistently, then Emma was better off without her. Over the next several days, Emma asked about Sarah constantly. When was she coming back? Could they call her? Could they visit her wherever she was? Each question was harder to deflect than the last, and Connor found himself getting shorter with Emma than he meant to be. She's not coming back, Emma. He finally snapped on Wednesday morning when Emma asked for the 5th time if Sarah might come to her school play. She's gone, and we need to stop talking about her. Emma's face crumpled, and Connor immediately felt like the worst father in the world. I'm sorry, baby, he said, kneeling down to her level. Daddy's just sad about Sarah leaving too. Then why can't we ask her to come back? Because she's your mother, and she abandoned you once already. Connor thought, because I can't trust her not to break your heart again, because I can't trust myself not to let her, because sometimes when people leave, they leave for good reasons, and we have to respect that. Emma nodded, but Connor could see that she didn't really understand. How could she? He barely understood it himself. That night after Emma went to bed, Connor's sister Lisa called. How are you holding up? She asked. Emma seemed pretty sad when I picked her up today. Connor hadn't told Lisa the truth about Sarah yet. Hadn't told anyone. The shame of being so thoroughly deceived was too raw, too humiliating. We're fine, he lied. Just adjusting to some changes. Connor, what happened? A month ago. Emma couldn't stop talking about Sarah. Now she won't mention her name, and you sound like someone died. Connor closed his eyes, leaning back in his recliner and wondering how his life had gotten so complicated. Sarah and I. Things didn't work out. Did you break up? I thought things were going really well between you two. They were. Until they weren't. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Connor, you don't have to tell me details, but Emma is really struggling with this. She keeps asking me when Sarah is coming back, and I don't know what to tell her. Tell her that sometimes people have to go away, and we can't control that. Tell her that she's loved and safe, and that's what matters. Is that what you really believe? Connor thought about that question long after Lisa hung up. Was Emma loved and safe? Yes, absolutely. Connor would die before he let anyone hurt his daughter. But was she better off without Sarah in her life? For 2 months, Emma had been happier than Connor had seen her since she was a toddler. She'd laughed more, smiled more, asked fewer sad questions about why she didn't have a mother like other kids. Sarah's presence had filled a hole in Emma's life that Connor hadn't even realized was there. But Sarah had also lied to them every single day. She'd built their relationship on deception, knowing that the truth could destroy them all. How could he trust someone who was capable of that level of manipulation? 2 weeks after Sarah left, Emma stopped asking when she was coming back. She stopped mentioning Sarah at all, in fact, which worried Connor even more than the constant questions had. Emma was withdrawing, becoming quiet and subdued, in a way that reminded Connor of the months after the original abandonment. She picked at her food, showed little interest in her usual activities, and began having nightmares that left her crying for someone who went away without being able to explain who she meant. Connor was failing her. He could see it, could feel it, but he didn't know how to fix it. How do you heal a child's heart when your own is shattered beyond repair 3 weeks after Sarah left? Connor got a call that stopped his heart. Emma had collapsed at school during recess, and they were rushing her to Mercy General Hospital. Connor abandoned his work, left his customer's car half repaired in the bay, and drove to the hospital faster than he'd ever driven in his life. He found Emma in a hospital bed in the pediatric unit, looking impossibly small and fragile against the white sheets. She was awake, but listless, her usually bright eyes dull and unfocused. What happened? Connor asked Dr. Patricia Williams, the pediatrician, who'd been caring for Emma since she was born. Physically, she's fine, Dr. Williams said, though her expression was concerned. Blood work is normal, no signs of illness or injury. But Connor, this looks like an anxiety response. Emma's teacher said she's been withdrawn lately, not eating much, having trouble concentrating. Connor sank into the chair beside Emma's bed, taking her small hand in his. Hey, baby. How are you feeling? Tired, Emma whispered. And sad. Dr. Williams gestured for Connor to join her in the hallway where they could talk privately. Connor, what's been going on at home? Any major changes? Stresses, disruptions to routine? Connor looked through the window at his daughter, who was staring at the ceiling with the kind of emptiness that scared him. There was someone, he said finally, a woman Emma had grown close to. She's not in our lives anymore, a romantic relationship that ended. Something like that? Dr. Williams nodded knowingly. Children Emma's age form attachments quickly, especially to potential mother figures. If this woman was important to Emma and then disappeared suddenly, it could definitely trigger this kind of response. So what do I do? Emma needs consistency and reassurance right now. She needs to know that you're not going anywhere, that she's safe and loved. But Connor. Dr. Williams paused, choosing her words carefully. She also needs to process this loss. Children can't heal from abandonment issues if we pretend the abandonment didn't happen. What does that mean? It means you need to help Emma understand what happened in age-appropriate terms. She needs to grieve this relationship so she can move forward. Connor felt like he was drowning. How was he supposed to help Emma grieve when he couldn't even process his own feelings? How was he supposed to explain Sarah's departure when he didn't understand it himself? They kept Emma overnight for observation, and Connor slept in the chair beside her bed. Around midnight, Emma woke from a restless sleep, calling out for Mommy. "I'm here, baby," Connor said softly, smoothing her hair. "Not you, Daddy. I want Mummy." Connor's chest tightened. "Which Mummy, sweetheart?" Emma looked at him with those serious brown eyes that saw too much. The real one. The one who came back. Connor felt the world tilt. "Emma, what do you mean I know Sarah is my mummy?" Emma said matter-of-factly. "She looks like me, and she knows all the things I like, and she loves me the way mummies love their little girls. But she went away again, and I don't understand why." Connor stared at his daughter, realizing that she'd known all along. On some level, Emma had recognized her mother even if she couldn't fully articulate or understand the recognition. "Emma, how long have you known since the zoo?" When she hugged me after I told her about the dinosaur mummies, it felt like when I was little before I could remember things very well. Emma's voice was small and confused. "Why did she leave again?" "Daddy, did I do something wrong this time too?" Connor climbed into the narrow hospital bed beside his daughter and held her as gently as he could. "Listen to me very carefully, Emma. You have never, ever done anything wrong. Not when you were a baby. Not now, not ever. Sometimes adults make mistakes, big mistakes, and children get hurt because of those mistakes. But it's never the child's fault. Then why won't she stay with us?" Connor didn't have an answer for that. He'd spent 3 weeks convincing himself that Sarah had left because she didn't really want to be a mother, because Emma and he weren't worth fighting for. But looking at his daughter's broken heart, he realized that maybe he didn't understand Sarah's motivations as well as he thought. "I don't know, baby. But I promise you this, you are loved, you are wanted, and I will never ever leave you." Emma curled against his chest, her small body shaking with exhaustion and grief. "I just want my family to be together, Daddy. All of us." That night, as Emma finally fell into a peaceful sleep in his arms, Connor made a decision that surprised him. He was going to call Sarah, not to reconcile, not to forgive, but to tell her what her abandonment was doing to their daughter. Sarah needed to know that her choices had consequences that Emma was suffering because of her inability to commit to being a mother. But when he pulled out his phone the next morning, Connor realized he didn't have Sarah's number. In the chaos of her departure, he'd never thought to save her contact information. And Sarah Mitchell wasn't listed in any directory he could find. It was Lisa who solved the problem. She arrived at the hospital that morning with coffee and breakfast, took one look at Emma's pale face, and demanded answers. "What happened?" she asked Connor in the hallway while Emma slept. Connor told her everything. The truth about Sarah's identity, the deception, the revelation, Emma's recognition of her mother. Lisa listened without judgment, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. "Connor," she said when he finished, "you have to find her." "Why?" "So she can break Emma's heart again, so Emma can have closure. Look at her, Connor. She's grieving for her mother, and she doesn't understand why she has to. That woman may have made terrible choices, but Emma loves her. And from what you've told me, Sarah loves Emma too. Love isn't enough if you can't commit to staying." "How do you know she can't commit? Did you give her a chance to prove that she could?" Connor stared at his sister. "She lied to us for 2 months, Lisa. How was I supposed to trust someone capable of that level of deception? Maybe she lied because she knew this would be your reaction. Maybe she was terrified of losing Emma again." Before Connor could respond, a knock on the doorframe interrupted them. Connor turned to see a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed with kind eyes and graying hair. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Connor Blake. I'm Dr. Elena Martinez. I'm Sarah's therapist." Connor stared at the woman in the doorway, trying to process this unexpected development. "You're Sarah's therapist, I am. Sarah gave me permission to contact you if things went badly. She wanted to make sure Emma had support if needed. Dr. Martinez glanced toward Emma's bed where she was sleeping peacefully. I understand Emma's been struggling since Sarah left. How did you know about Emma being hospitalized? Sarah's been calling me daily since she saw you 3 weeks ago. Yesterday she mentioned that she'd driven by the school and seen an ambulance. She was terrified that something had happened to Emma, but didn't feel she had the right to call and ask. Connor felt something complicated twist in his chest. Sarah had been watching over Emma from a distance, still caring, still worried. Lisa stood up from her chair. I'm Lisa Connor's sister. I'm going to get more coffee and let you two talk. She squeezed Connor's shoulder as she passed. Listen to what she has to say. Dr. Martinez took Lisa's seat, her expression compassionate but serious. Connor, I want to start by saying that I understand your anger. What Sarah did leaving 3 years ago, and then not being honest about who she was when she came back, those were significant betrayals of trust. Then why are you here defending her? I'm not here to defend anyone. I'm here because a child is hurting, and I have information that might help you understand the situation better. Connor looked at Emma, still sleeping in the hospital bed, her face pale and peaceful for the first time in weeks. Sarah was my patient for 3 years. Dr. Martinez continued. I worked with her through severe postpartum depression, anxiety, and complex trauma from her own childhood. The woman who left you 3 years ago was genuinely afraid that she was going to hurt Emma. So she said. Connor, do you understand what severe postpartum depression looks like? It's not just feeling sad or overwhelmed. It can involve intrusive thoughts about harming the baby, complete disconnection from maternal instincts, paranoia, and suicidal ideation. Sarah was experiencing all of that. Connor felt his chest tighten. He'd known Sarah had been struggling after Emma was born, but she'd never shared the details of her mental state. The morning she left, she called me in crisis. She'd had a moment where she'd been angry with Emma and grabbed her more roughly than she'd intended. She saw fear in Emma's eyes and became convinced that she was going to seriously hurt her daughter if she stayed. So leaving was the right choice. Connor's voice was bitter. Leaving the way she did without explanation, without getting help first, without working on a plan with you, that was wrong. But recognizing that she wasn't safe to be around Emma at that moment, that might have been the most responsible thing she could have done. Connor was quiet, trying to reconcile this information with his 3 years of anger and resentment. The Sarah who came back to your life isn't the same woman who left. Dr. Martinez continued. She spent 3 years in intensive therapy. She worked through her depression, learned coping strategies, processed her childhood trauma. She built a career helping other families because she wanted to prevent other children from experiencing what Emma had experienced. But she lied to us. Yes, she did. And that was wrong. But Connor, she lied because she was terrified of losing Emma again. She knew that if you realized who she was, you'd probably never let her see Emma. So she made the choice to be dishonest in order to be close to her daughter. That's manipulation. It's also the desperate act of a mother who'd spent 3 years missing her child and thought she'd found a way to be part of her life again. Connor looked at Emma, thinking about how happy she'd been for those 2 months, how much more confident and secure she'd seemed. Dr. Martinez, even if I believe that Sarah has changed, how can I trust someone who's capable of lying that extensively? How do I know she won't leave again when things get hard? You don't know that, Dr. Martinez said honestly. But I can tell you that Sarah has spent 3 years proving to herself that she's capable of commitment, of following through on responsibilities, of being the person she wants to be. Her work with families in crisis, her completion of her degree, her decision to move back to be near Emma, these are all evidence of someone who's learned to keep her promises. Connor rubbed his face, feeling exhausted and confused. What does Sarah want? Why did she send you here? She wants to be part of Emma's life. She wants to be a family with you and Emma. But she understands that she's broken your trust. She's willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild that trust, including continuing therapy, being completely transparent about her mental health, and accepting whatever boundaries you need to set. And if I say no, if I decide Emma is better off without her. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment. That's your choice as Emma's father. But I think you should consider what Emma wants. From what Sarah tells me, Emma recognized her mother on some level. Children often know more than we give them credit for. As if summoned by their conversation, Emma stirred in her bed, opening her eyes and looking around the room. "Daddy," she said sleepily. "Who's the lady Connor moved to sit beside Emma's bed?" "This is Dr. Martinez, baby. She's a friend of Sarah's." Emma's eyes went wide and she sat up straighter. "Do you know where Sarah is?" "Is she okay?" Dr. Martinez smiled gently. "She's okay, sweetheart. She's been very worried about you, though. She heard you weren't feeling well." "I miss her," Emma said simply. "I want her to come back." "I know you do," Dr. Martinez said. "And she misses you too. She misses you so much." Emma looked between Dr. Martinez and Connor. "Daddy, can't we ask her to come back? I promise I'll be really good if she comes back." Connor felt his heart break all over again. "Emma, sweetheart, you're already perfect. Sarah leaving had nothing to do with you not being good enough. Then why can't she come back?" Connor met Dr. Martinez's eyes over Emma's head. The older woman nodded encouragingly. "Because Daddy has to make sure it's safe," Connor said slowly. "When adults love each other, they have to be honest with each other. And Sarah wasn't honest with us about who she was." Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "But she was honest about loving me. Right, I could tell she really loved me." "Yes, baby. She really loves you. Then maybe we could try again. But with more honesty this time." Connor stared at his 6-year-old daughter, amazed by her wisdom and capacity for forgiveness. Dr. Martinez stood up. "Connor, I'm going to leave my card. When you're ready, if you're ready, call me. We can all sit down together and talk about what moving forward might look like." After Dr. Martinez left, Connor sat with Emma, both of them quiet and thoughtful. "Daddy," Emma said finally, "do you still love Sarah?" The question caught Connor off guard. "That's complicated, sweetheart, but do you? Even though you're mad at her," Connor thought about that question as Emma was discharged from the hospital later that day. Did he still love Sarah? He was angry, hurt, betrayed, confused. But underneath all of that, yes, he still loved her. Both versions of her, the wife who'd left and the woman who'd come back. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe that was why this hurt so much. 2 weeks later, Connor found himself sitting in Dr. Martinez's office, waiting for Sarah to arrive. Emma was at school, unaware that this meeting was happening. Connor had needed time to process everything Dr. Martinez had told him, time to decide whether he was willing to try to rebuild what had been broken. The decision had ultimately come down to Emma. She wasn't improving. If anything, she was getting worse, more withdrawn, more anxious, asking constantly about Sarah. Connor realized that whether or not he could forgive Sarah, Emma needed closure. She needed to understand what had happened and why. Sarah arrived exactly on time, looking nervous and hopeful and terrified all at once. She'd lost weight, Connor noticed, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she wasn't sleeping well. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said quietly, taking the chair across from him. "I'm not doing it for you," Connor said, not unkindly, but honestly. "I'm doing it for Emma. She's struggling and she needs answers. How is she anxious? Depressed? She collapsed at school from stress, and she's been having nightmares. She knows you're her mother, Sarah. She's known for weeks, maybe months. Sarah's face crumpled. Oh, God. I never wanted. I thought if she didn't consciously remember. Children know more than we think they do. Dr. Martinez interjected gently. Emma's unconscious mind recognized you, even if her conscious mind couldn't process the recognition. What does she need from me? Sarah asked. Whatever it is, I'll do it. Connor studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But all he saw was genuine remorse and desperate love. She needs the truth, Connor said. All of it. Age-appropriate but complete. She needs to understand why you left, why you came back, why you didn't tell us who you were. And then we figure out if there's a way to move forward that doesn't involve any more lies or broken promises. They spent 2 hours in Dr. Martinez's office, with Sarah answering every question Connor had been carrying for 3 years. She explained the depression, the intrusive thoughts, the terror that she was going to harm Emma. She explained the 3 years of therapy, the work she'd done to get healthy, the career choices that had led her back to Ohio. She explained the car breakdown, the recognition, the impossible choice between revealing her identity and losing the chance to be close to Emma again. I know it was wrong, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. I know I should have told you immediately. But Connor, those 2 months with you and Emma, they were the happiest I'd been since I left. Emma was so bright and confident and beautiful, and you'd done such an incredible job raising her alone. I was terrified that if you knew who I was, you'd take that away. So you decided to take that choice away from me instead. Yes. And I was wrong. I was selfish and scared and wrong. Connor was quiet for a long time, processing everything he'd heard. Finally, he looked directly at Sarah. If we do this, if we try to build some kind of relationship for Emma's sake, what guarantee do I have that you won't leave again when things get difficult? You don't have any guarantees, Sarah said honestly. I can't promise you that I'll never make mistakes, that I'll never struggle with mental health issues, that I'll never disappoint you again. But I can promise you that I've learned to ask for help when I need it. I can promise you that I'm committed to being honest even when it's scary. And I can promise you that nothing in this world could make me voluntarily leave Emma again. What about me? Connor asked quietly. What about the relationship between us? Sarah met his eyes, and Connor saw vulnerability and hope and love all mixed together. I love you, she said simply. I loved you when I was 22 and scared and sick. I love you now at 28 as a healthy woman who knows what she wants. I love the man you were then, and I love the man you've become. But I understand if you can't trust me again. I understand if you can only tolerate me for Emma's sake. Connor felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the anger and resentment he'd been carrying. I love you too, he admitted. That's what makes this so hard. I never stopped loving you, Sarah. Even when I hated you for leaving, I loved you. And these past 2 months, falling for you again while thinking you were someone else, it was the best I'd felt since you left. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. What would you both need to feel safe trying again? Connor and Sarah looked at each other, 3 years of hurt and love and hope hanging in the air between them. Therapy, Connor said. Individual and couples. I need to work through my trust issues, and we need to learn how to communicate honestly. Agreed, Sarah said immediately. And transparency about your mental health. If you're struggling, I need to know. Emma needs to know in age-appropriate ways. Of course. And time. We don't jump back into being a family. We rebuild slowly with Emma's needs at the center of every decision, whatever you think is best. Connor took a deep breath. And I need you to understand that if you hurt Emma again, If you make promises you can't keep, if you disappear when things get hard, I will do everything in my power to make sure you never see her again. I understand. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of this tentative agreement settling between them. So where do we start? Sarah asked. We start by telling Emma the truth, Connor said. Together. Saturday morning arrived clear and cold, the first real taste of winter in Ohio. Connor had spent the week preparing Emma for what he'd called an important conversation, and she'd been vibrating with curiosity and hope. Is Sarah coming over? She'd asked every day. Yes, baby. She's coming over and we're all going to talk about some important things. Sarah arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, carrying a small wrapped gift and looking more nervous than Connor had ever seen her. Emma spotted her through the living room window and ran to the door before Connor could stop her. Sarah. You came back. Emma threw herself into Sarah's arms with the kind of abandon that only children possess. Hello, sweetheart, Sarah said, holding Emma tightly and closing her eyes as if trying to memorize the moment. I missed you so much. I missed you too. Are you staying this time? That's what we need to talk about, Connor said gently. Come on, let's all sit down together. They settled on the couch, Emma between Connor and Sarah, her small hands holding on to both of them as if she could keep them together through force of will. Emma, Connor began, remember how we've talked about how sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and sometimes those mistakes affect children? Emma nodded seriously. Well, Sarah and Daddy both made some mistakes and we need to tell you about them so you can understand what's been happening. Sarah took a shaky breath. Emma, sweetheart, do you remember when you told me about your mommy who went away when you were little? Yes. Well, baby. Sarah's voice broke slightly. I'm that mummy. I'm your birth mother, the one who left when you were 2 years old. Emma stared at Sarah for a long moment, her expression cycling through confusion, understanding, and something that might have been relief. I knew, she said quietly. I mean, I didn't know, no, but I felt it. You felt like my mummy. Sarah started crying, pulling Emma into her arms. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left you. Why did you leave, Emma? Asked, her voice small but not accusatory. Connor watched as Sarah chose her words carefully, explaining depression in terms a 6-year-old could understand. She talked about being sick in her mind, about being scared that she might accidentally hurt Emma, about thinking that Emma would be safer and happier without her. But I was wrong, Sarah said firmly. Leaving wasn't the right answer. I should have gotten help and stayed with you and Daddy. I should have been brave enough to ask for help instead of running away. Are you better now? Emma asked. Yes, baby. I went to doctors who helped me feel better, and I learned how to be a good mommy. That's why I came back, because I wanted to be your mommy again, if you and Daddy would let me. Emma looked between Connor and Sarah, with that serious expression she got when processing important information. So you pretended to be my friend, Sarah, but you were really my mommy, Sarah, the whole time? Yes, and that was wrong too. I was scared that if I told you and Daddy the truth right away, you wouldn't want to see me anymore, so I pretended to be someone else, so I could spend time with you. That was lying, Emma said matter-of-factly. Yes, it was lying. And lying to people you love is wrong even when you're scared. Emma was quiet for several minutes, and Connor could practically see her young mind working through everything she'd learned. Mommy? Sarah, she said finally. Are you going to leave again? No, baby, never again. I promise you that I will never leave you again. What if you get sick in your mind again? Sarah glanced at Connor, who nodded encouragingly. They'd agreed to be completely honest. If I start to feel sick again, I'll tell you and Daddy right away, and I'll go to my doctor to get help. But I won't leave. I'll stay and work through whatever is wrong because that's what families do. And what if you and Daddy fight? Then we'll work it out by talking and maybe getting help from other grown-ups who are good at helping families solve problems. But we won't leave each other. Emma nodded slowly, then looked at Connor. Daddy, do you forgive Mommy Sarah for leaving and for lying? Connor felt his chest tighten. I'm working on it, baby. Forgiveness takes time when someone hurts you, but I'm trying and I think I'll get there. Do you love her? Connor met Sarah's eyes over Emma's head. Yes, sweetheart. I love her very much. Good, Emma said with satisfaction, because I love her too and I want us all to be a family. Sarah was crying openly now. Emma, baby, would you like that? Would you want me to be your mommy for real this time? You already are my mommy. Emma said simply, You've always been my mommy. You just went away for a while. The next several months were a careful dance of rebuilding trust and creating new patterns. Sarah moved into a small apartment 10 minutes from Connor's house, close enough to be part of their daily lives, but separate enough to respect the boundaries Connor needed. They attended family therapy sessions every week, working through the complex emotions of reunion and forgiveness. Connor went to individual therapy to process his abandonment issues and learn to trust again. Sarah continued her own therapy to maintain her mental health and develop better coping strategies. Emma thrived under the careful attention of both parents. She had dinner with Sarah twice a week, spent Saturday afternoons with her, and talked to her on the phone every night before bed. Sarah attended every school event, every doctor's appointment, every milestone. They moved slowly, deliberately, building trust through consistency and honesty. When Sarah had a bad day with anxiety, she told Connor and Emma. When Connor felt overwhelmed by doubt, he talked to Dr. Martinez instead of shutting down. When Emma worried that one of them might leave, they reassured her with words and actions. 6 months after the reunion, Connor made a decision that surprised even him. He asked Sarah to move in with them. Are you sure? Sarah asked. I don't want to rush anything. I'm sure, Connor said, taking her hand. Emma asks every day when you're going to live with us. And honestly, I'm ready. We've proved that we can handle problems together. We've proved that we can be honest with each other. I want us to be a real family. The morning Sarah moved in, Emma helped carry boxes from the car, chattering excitedly about how they were going to decorate the house and what kind of curtains would look best in Sarah's new office space. Mommy, Sarah, Emma said, as they arranged Sarah's books on the shelf. Are you happy to be home? Sarah looked around the living room at Connor assembling furniture and at Emma organizing books by color, and felt a peace she'd never experienced before. I'm the happiest I've ever been, baby. Good, Emma said, because this is where you belong. That evening, after Emma was asleep and the boxes were mostly unpacked, Connor and Sarah sat on the front porch with cups of tea, listening to the sounds of their neighborhood settling into night. Do you think we're going to make it? Sarah asked quietly. Connor took her hand, intertwining their fingers. I think we're going to be better than we ever were before. We've learned how to fight for each other instead of giving up. We've learned how to be honest even when it's scary. We've learned that love is a choice you make every day, not just a feeling you have. I love you, Sarah said. Both of you. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for being brave enough to take it. 8 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Connor took Emma and Sarah back to the garage where their story had begun. Emma was helping him organize tools while Sarah worked on billing at the small desk in the corner. Daddy, Emma said, looking up from the toolbox she was reorganizing. I have something important to ask you. Connor set down his wrench, recognizing that tone. When Emma had something important to ask, it was usually something that would change his entire world. What's that, baby? Emma walked over to where Sarah was working and took her hand. Then she walked back to Connor and took his hand, standing between them and looking up with those serious brown eyes. "I think you should marry Mummy, Sarah," she announced. "For real this time." Connor and Sarah stared at each other over Emma's head, both of them starting to smile. "You think so?" Connor asked. "I know so," Emma said firmly. "You love each other and you love me, and we're already a family. We should make it official." "What do you think, Sarah?" Connor asked, his heart pounding. "Should we make it official?" "I think Emma might be the smartest person in this family," Sarah said, tears shining in her eyes. Connor knelt down so he was at Emma's eye level. "Emma, if I asked Mommy, Sarah, to marry me, what would you want to say to her?" Emma thought about this very seriously, then turned to Sarah with the gravity of someone making an important speech. "Mommy, Sarah," she said formally, "will you please marry me and Daddy? Will you be my real mummy forever and ever and promise never to leave again?" Sarah was crying now, but she was smiling too. "Yes, baby. Yes, I will marry you and Daddy. I will be your real mummy forever and ever, and I promise I will never leave again." "Good," Emma said with satisfaction. "Now Daddy can give you the ring." Connor laughed. "What ring?" Emma rolled her eyes with the exasperation of a 6-year-old dealing with particularly slow adults. "The ring you bought last week, the one you hid in your toolbox behind the socket wrenches." Connor stared at his daughter. "How did you—" "I help you organize your tools every day, Daddy. I notice things." Connor looked at Sarah, who was laughing through her tears. "Well," he said, "I guess I've been caught." He walked to his toolbox and pulled out the small velvet box he'd hidden there a week ago, after finally admitting to himself that he was ready to make this commitment, ready to trust in the family they'd rebuilt from broken pieces. "Sarah," he said, taking her hand, "I love you. I loved you when we were 22 and thought love was simple. I love you now at 29, knowing that love is the hardest and most important work we'll ever do. Will you marry me? Will you choose our family every day through whatever comes?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Yes, I choose this family every day for the rest of my life." As Connor slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, and Emma cheered, they heard a sound from the garage entrance. Connor looked up to see several of his regular customers standing in the doorway, grinning and applauding. "About time," called Mrs. Henderson from the hardware store. "We've been waiting for this for months. Best romance story I've ever seen," added Mr. Garcia. "Better than the movies." Emma ran to the small group of neighbors and customers who'd become their extended family. "Guess what? My mummy and daddy are getting married," we heard sweetheart Mrs. Henderson said, wiping her eyes. "And we couldn't be happier for all of you." As Connor and Sarah held each other in the garage where they'd first found their way back to each other, surrounded by the community that had supported them through the hardest year of their lives, Emma stood between them and whispered the words that made everything complete. "Now we're a real family, forever and always." 2 years later, Blake's Auto Repair had expanded to include a small office where Sarah ran a family counseling practice, helping other families navigate crisis and reunion. The walls were covered with Emma's artwork, now more sophisticated at 8 years old, and photos of the three of them at various milestones. On a sunny Saturday morning, Connor was teaching Emma how to change oil, while Sarah worked with a family in crisis, helping a young mother who'd made mistakes learn how to rebuild trust with her children. "Daddy," Emma said, carefully measuring oil into the funnel, "do you think people can really change?" Connor looked through the window at Sarah, who was listening intently to her client's story, offering compassion and practical guidance to someone who needed hope. "I think people can change when they want to. Badly enough," he said. "When they're willing to do the hard work and ask for help. Like Mommy did. Exactly like Mommy did." Emma nodded seriously, then smiled. "I'm glad she changed. I'm glad she came back. Me too, baby. Me too." As the afternoon sun streamed through the garage windows, casting golden light on their small family business, Connor felt a gratitude so deep it took his breath away. They'd taken the broken pieces of their lives and built something stronger than what they'd had before. Not perfect, but real. Not without challenges, but filled with love. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and walk away. Hit that like button to let us know this moved you. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove love always finds a way back home, and share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Your story matters too, and we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What second chance are you grateful for? Sometimes the most beautiful families aren't born. They're built from broken peace and healed hearts, one brave choice at a time.